Why do you think Tolkien's stories, his world, which he says is really our world, what do you think the sticking power is? What makes it so, I don't want to use the word popular, but popular? Why is it still so exciting and
Mhm.
inviting?
Well, if we use his terms, what he's doing is subcreating, right? And he creates a
Mm.
secondary world. And if the writer is good enough, and as he'll indicate, this is very difficult to do, and he does it with such mastery,
Hmm.
then as you enter into that world, as you just said, you believe it. The world is believable. There's no point at which you say, no, that just couldn't ever happen. I mean, everything in it, even though it's a sub-created world, as he says, um, has a truth about it within that world. Like you said, his sense is that he discovered it rather
Mm.
than than simply invented it. So on the level of just sheer artistry, it's just superbly well done. And you find yourself entering into it, and the way the characters act and interact and succeed or fail, all of that rings very true to you. So I would say I would start there simply, and I think Tolkien would start there, that simply as a work of literature, this is extremely well done. But having said that, what is the attraction of it? Well,
Hmm.
two things that people have said come to mind as you say that. And I've, for my work, I read a lot of stories of spiritual experience because I use and love the examples that when I'm illustrating the teachings.
Hmm.
And of course, I just love stories. I think we all do.
Yeah.
Um, but what you find is in some of these stories, and I've heard this more than once, people will say, I didn't have any particular faith, but I read The Lord of the Rings, and I didn't know what it was, but from then on, I knew that there was something. And it set me off on a journey, to find it. So that's one thing I think. Tolkien has words for all of that, in
Hmm.
his essay on fairy stories and so forth. But
Yeah.
when we read it, it rings true and it amplifies the horizons. And if you're a truth seeker, you're on a journey already when you've read it. The second thing that I've heard people say, this was a group of consecrated religious women,
Hmm.
and one of them was saying to me that things can get pretty dark in the culture around us, and when we get discouraged, we just go back to the Lord of the Rings and we dip into it again. And the deepest reason for that, I think, now that I have read Tolkien's own description of what he's doing in the Lord of the Rings. Um, I think that's the deepest reason why, because whether we can put words to it or not, the
Hmm.
fundamental message is that you may suffer in the pursuit of good, and there may be failures and tragedy and defections along the way, and it may seem like darkness is swallowing up everything, but that's not the end of the story.
Hmm.
That's the deep message of the gospel with the resurrection after the passion. At the end of his essay on fairy stories, that page or two there is what, more than anything else for me, unlocks what the Lord of the Rings is really
Yes.
about.
Hmm.
And that's the deepest message of the Lord of the Rings, as it is of the Hobbit, but on a whole nother level in the Lord of the Rings, that when everything seems to be directed toward defeat, the good are divided. Some have defected. Frodo refuses the mission that he's given on the very chasm, the brinks of the
Yeah.
Mount
Mount Doom.
Doom, and
Hmm.
then out of in quotes nowhere, but out of grace, out of God's intervention, everything is turned around and evil is defeated and joy is triumphant. And then you have the fields at Cormoran and all of those kinds of things that you have afterwards.
Hmm.
And to be steeped again in the fact that if we put that in theological terms, which probably Tolkien would wince a little, a little at,
Yeah. Right. Right.
maybe not, because he uses theological terms in that story, in the essay.
Hmm. Yeah. He does.
What it means is that salvation is real, redemption is real, and that's the
Hmm.
bottom line in history. And good will not finally overcome. I'm sorry, evil will not finally overcome, but good will, by God's intervention, in
Yeah.
spite of all of our weaknesses, but our best efforts and our frailty, and we can live with that confidence. And I think that's the deepest reason why I really love The Lord of the Rings. If I can share one more
I
thing
love it.
here.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Um,
Sure.
This is something that I came across in the letters. And I just reread it just before we're meeting here. It just came to mind again, so I looked at it again.
Sure,
And
yeah.
this is in 1944, and so we're in World War II. And he's writing to his son Christopher, who is in the military in South Africa. And he shares with him the homily at the Sunday Mass, the most recent Sunday, which he found. He said it was very long, but one of the best homilies that Father has given. And the gospel was in Mark 5, and that is the woman with the hemorrhage, and then the healing of the daughter of Jairus,
Right.
which led the priest to share something that had happened in Lourdes, maybe about 15 years earlier. The parents had taken a young boy with tuberculosis to Lourdes in a desperate hope for his cure, because he was going to die of this. And they had spent the days there and done all the things that you do there, and nothing had happened. And they were on the train now, ready to leave Lourdes, with a real sadness in their heart. The parents, the boy, and he says 2 nurses were with him. And then as the train pulled out of the station and passed in view of the sanctuary area there where the grotto is and all, the boy suddenly said, I want to go play with that girl. That he had met another girl there who had been there for the same reason and actually had herself been healed. And so he got up and went to where she was, and they played for a while, came back and said, I'm hungry. And he ate a huge meal, which he'd not been able to do. And the parents realized that the boy was healed. Now, Tolkien, as he's describing this to his son Christopher, he says, I felt then that experience, that is when everything looks like it's dark and black and hopeless, and good has been banished. You have this sudden experience, the sudden joyous turn, the eucatastrophe that he speaks about. And the just the thrill of that, he says, that's the heart of fairy stories. That's above all what I was trying to capture, and that's the heart of the gospel too. Wow. So if we get to the real, beyond simply enjoying a good story, and I know both of us could go on without end about specific things that we love in it. I think that's the deepest reason why this is so fresh, because ultimately, set in a sub-created world, but with great artistry so that it rings true, it's the gospel. Finally, it's the message of the gospel. The resurrection, death, Good Friday is not the final word, and Easter Sunday is.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness. Father Gallagher, my brain is exploding. I want to go in so many different directions right now based on what you were just sharing. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that's what makes the story so nuclear, is that behind almost every page is the gospel, are glimmers of the gospel, or sort of the narration of the spiritual life, or kind of lessons in virtue and in life and transcendence. The whole story seems, as we move on this horizontal plane through the world on this quest, there's these moments of absolute vertical transcendence that just sort of pierce your heart. As you said, I could go on about moments where I have to put the book down for a moment. It's almost, I'm doing spiritual reading. I need a moment to reflect on them stepping into Tom Bombadil's house, or the experience of the Great Hall of Fire in Rivendell. I just need a moment, because I feel like I've just gotten a taste of the gospel, or the Holy Spirit feels very present in a way that I mean, there's not a whole lot of books of fiction where you have that sort of divine encounter. I want to circle back real quick to something you were saying about this kind of mysticism that's somehow pregnant in the Lord of the Rings, in Tolkien's work. So we taught this course in November on Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and I had a student. She told the whole class, to our amazement, she told the class that she, for years, was an atheist, wasn't brought up on any particular faith whatsoever, just kind of a secular household, but a well-read household, she said. And somehow in her teenage years, she stumbled on Tolkien's Silmarillion. So this, for viewers, this would be a wonderful book, sort of the prequel to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. This is where the creation of Middle-earth happens. And anyway, she said that she was reading Silmarillion and loved this vision of the world made in music, sung by the Ainur, these angelic beings. And she said it stuck with her so deeply. And years later, probably in college, she starts having these encounters and starts awakening to the possibility of faith in Christianity. And she said, I read Genesis, the book of Genesis. She said, it brought me back to the Silmarillion. And it felt like a kind of homecoming. Like I knew this story, and now somehow it's become real. So almost as if Tolkien was preparing like a pre-evangelization, getting her ready for the fairy tale that came true. Just what a gift. And again, it's rare, I think, to find a writer that has such a baptized imagination, but as you said, Father Gallagher, can do it so artfully and masterfully. The famous quote of Tolkien saying, this is a profoundly Catholic and religious work. And then he says in a letter to a priest friend, not intentionally, but in revision when I went back. So you can see like a true artist is being truly inspired and wants to write a great story, make a great work, but there's an unseen presence that is going to use it and touch other people.